This section is for premium guests only. The words land like ice across the threshold of the crystal dining room. A young black girl in a yellow sundress freezes mid-step, her hand still reaching for the gleaming brass handle. Behind her, the ocean stretches endlessly blue through floor-to-ceiling windows. Inside, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths and soft laughter. The chef, tall, broad-shouldered, his white uniform crisp as paper, plants himself in the doorway. His hand rises in a slow, deliberate gesture. "Stop. Not you." She looks down at the reservation card in her trembling fingers, then back up at him. Her lips part to speak, but no sound comes. Around her, other passengers glide past into the restaurant without a second glance. White families. Smiling couples. Not one of them is stopped. Her heart pounds so loud she's sure everyone can hear it. But what she doesn't know, what he doesn't know, is that within minutes, the entire ship will be locked down, and the people coming for him won't be wearing aprons. The Sea of Roses had been sailing for 3 days, and for Amara Hughes, every moment had felt like a dream. At 13 years old, she had never been on a cruise before, never been anywhere, really, except the small Georgia town where she lived with her grandmother. But when her essay won the regional youth writing competition, the grand prize had been this, a 7-day luxury Caribbean cruise for 2. She'd chosen to bring her grandmother, Miss Claudette Hughes, a woman who had raised her since she was 4 years old, who had worked double shifts at the hospital laundry for decades, and who had never once taken a real vacation. Amara wanted to give her something beautiful, something she deserved. The Sea of Roses was exactly that. Towering white decks, marble lobbies, infinity pools that seemed to spill into the horizon. Their stateroom had a balcony overlooking the turquoise sea, and every morning Amara woke to the sound of waves and the smell of salt air. It was the kind of place she had only seen in movies, but even in Paradise, she had felt the shift. Small things at first. The way the poolside attendant had asked to see her room key 3 times while the white family next to her wasn't asked once. The way the activities coordinator had suggested she might enjoy the youth deck instead of the teen lounge, even though she was the exact age listed on the sign. The way people's eyes lingered just a second too long when she walked through the lobby in her sundress and sandals. Her grandmother had noticed too, though she hadn't said much. Miss Claudette had lived through enough to recognize the language of exclusion, even when it was wrapped in polite smiles. On the 4th evening, they had a reservation at the Crystal Dining Room, the ship's premium restaurant located on Deck 12. It required formal reservations, which Amara had made weeks in advance using the VIP access included with her prize package. She had been excited all day, picking out her nicest dress, a soft yellow one her grandmother had bought her for church, and pulling her long braids into a neat ponytail. Miss Claudette wore a navy dress with pearl earrings, her silver hair styled carefully. She looked elegant, dignified, and proud. As they walked toward the restaurant entrance just after 6 o'clock, Amara felt a flutter of anticipation. This was the kind of night she wanted to remember forever. The Crystal Dining Room was breathtaking. Through the open double doors, she could see tables draped in white linen, candles flickering in glass holders, and waiters moving gracefully between guests. A string quartet played softly in the corner. The ceiling glittered with chandeliers that looked like frozen waterfalls. But as Amara stepped forward, a figure appeared in the doorway. He was a large man, maybe in his 40s, with a thick build and a stern face. His chef's uniform was immaculate, the tall white toque adding to his imposing presence. A brass nameplate on his chest read, Chef Dominic Hartwell, Executive Chef. He looked directly at Amara and raised his hand. "This section is for premium guests only." Amara blinked, confused. "We have a reservation," she said quietly, holding up the printed card the concierge had given her that morning. Chef Hartwell didn't even glance at it. "I'm afraid there's been a mistake. This dining room requires a special access pass. You'll need to eat at the Horizon Cafe on Deck 5. Miss Claudette stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "We were given this reservation as part of a competition prize. It includes access to this restaurant." The chef's expression didn't change. I don't know anything about that. If you have an issue, you can take it up with guest services tomorrow. For now, I need you to clear the entrance. We have actual guests waiting. The words hung in the air like poison. Actual guests. Amara felt her face grow hot. She looked past the chef into the dining room and saw dozens of people seated comfortably. White couples, white families, even a few teenagers laughing over plates of lobster and champagne flutes. Not one of them had been stopped at the door. "May I speak to the maitre d'?" Miss Claudette asked, her voice steady despite the tightness in her jaw. "I am the authority here," Chef Hartwell said, stepping slightly forward to block the view inside. "And I'm telling you, you don't belong in this dining room. Now please move along before I have to call security." A small crowd had begun to gather. Other passengers slowed as they approached, whispering to each other, some pulling out their phones. A young white couple walked up behind Amara and Miss Claudette, and without a word, Chef Hartwell stepped aside and smiled warmly. "Good evening. Welcome to the Crystal Dining Room. Right this way." They walked past Amara as though she were invisible. Amara's hands trembled. Her throat felt tight, and tears stung the corners of her eyes. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all she could do was stand there feeling small and humiliated. Miss Claudette placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Come on, baby," she said softly. "We don't need to be where we're not wanted." But as they turned to leave, a voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. "Wait!" A tall black woman in a sleek gray suit stepped forward from the group of onlookers. Her eyes were sharp, her posture commanding. She held up a leather badge wallet. "Agent Kendra Sims, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'd like to see that reservation card, sweetheart." Amara's heart leapt. She handed the card over with shaking fingers. Agent Sims examined it briefly, then turned to Chef Hartwell. Her voice was ice. "This reservation is valid. It's issued under a federally recognized youth achievement program. Denying access based on anything other than dining room capacity is a violation of Title II of the Civil Rights Act. Would you like to explain why you just turned away a confirmed guest?" Chef Hartwell's face flushed. There must have been a misunderstanding. You didn't realize she had the right paperwork?" Agent Sims stepped closer. "Or you didn't realize someone was watching?" The crowd had grown larger now. Phones were openly recording. A cruise staff member in a white uniform appeared, looking panicked. "Is there a problem here?" "Yes," Agent Sims said without breaking eye contact with the chef. "There's a very big problem, and it's about to get much bigger." She pulled out her phone and made a call. Her voice was calm, but her words were sharp and deliberate. "This is Agent Sims. I need a secure hold on the Sea of Roses, full passenger manifest review, and I want the senior officers in the main conference room in 20 minutes. We have a civil rights violation in progress, and I'm not letting this ship dock until we get answers." Chef Hartwell's face went pale. The staff member stammered something about protocols, but Agent Sims silenced him with a look. She turned back to Amara and Miss Claudette, her expression softening. "You two are going to have dinner in that dining room tonight, and I'm going to make sure no one ever treats you like this again." Amara looked up at her grandmother, whose eyes were glassy but fierce. Miss Claudette nodded once, and together they walked through the doorway and into the crystal dining room. Behind them, the murmurs grew louder. Cameras flashed, and somewhere deep in the ship's operations center, alarms were beginning to sound. The crystal dining room felt different now. Every eye in the space had turned toward the entrance, where Amara and Miss Claudette stood frozen between humiliation and vindication. The soft murmur of conversation had died completely, replaced by a tense electric silence. Even the string quartet had stopped mid-phrase, their bows hovering uncertainly over violin strings. Agent Kendra Sims stood beside them like a sentinel, her FBI badge still visible in her hand. She was in her early 40s with close-cropped natural hair, sharp cheekbones, and an air of unshakable authority. Her gray suit was tailored perfectly, and the way she carried herself made it clear she was not someone who could be dismissed or intimidated. Chef Dominic Hartwell remained in the doorway, his face a mixture of confusion and barely concealed anger. The cruise staff member, A young man in his 20s with a nervous smile hovered nearby, wringing his hands.
Agent Sims, I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding.
Perhaps we can resolve this quietly? Quietly? Agent Sims turned to him slowly, her voice cold enough to freeze the Caribbean air. You mean the way your chef quietly denied a 13-year-old girl access to a restaurant she had every legal right to enter? That kind of quiet? The young man paled. I didn't mean, what's your name? Agent Sims asked. Marcus. Marcus Delgado. I'm the assistant guest services manager. Well, Marcus, here's what's going to happen. You're going to escort these two ladies to the best table in this dining room. You're going to make sure they receive impeccable service. And then you're going to meet me in the operations center, where we're going to have a very long conversation about federal civil rights law and how cruise lines operating under U.S. maritime jurisdiction are bound by it. Do you understand? Marcus nodded quickly, his throat bobbing as he swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. He gestured toward the interior of the dining room with a shaking hand. Mrs. Hughes, Amara, please, right this way. I apologize for any confusion. Miss Claudette squeezed Amara's shoulder gently, and together they stepped past Chef Hartwell, who stood rigid and silent, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cords. As Amara walked by, she caught the faintest whisper from him, low enough that only she could hear. This isn't over. Her stomach twisted, but she kept walking. The dining room was even more beautiful up close. Soft golden light from the chandeliers bathed everything in warmth. The tables were set with fine china, crystal glasses, and folded napkins that looked like swans. Through the massive windows, the ocean stretched endlessly, the setting sun painting the horizon in shades of orange and violet. Marcus led them to a table near the window, one of the best spots in the room. He pulled out chairs for both of them, his hands still trembling slightly. Your server will be with you momentarily. Again, my deepest apologies. As he hurried away, Amara and Miss Claudette sat down slowly, the weight of what had just happened settling over them. Around the dining room, whispers had resumed, though now they were accompanied by furtive glances and pointed fingers. Some passengers looked sympathetic. Others looked annoyed, as if the disruption had ruined their evening. Amara's hands were still shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, trying to steady her breathing. She felt exposed, like every person in the room was judging her, dissecting her, deciding whether she truly belonged. Miss Claudette reached across the table and took her hand. Hold your head up, baby, she said softly. You did nothing wrong. Not one thing, Amara nodded, though tears were burning at the edges of her vision. Why did he do that, Grandma? Why did he look at me like I was nothing? Miss Claudette's face hardened, the lines around her mouth deepening. She had lived 73 years, and in that time, she had seen more than her share of men like Chef Hartwell, men who believed their authority gave them the right to decide who mattered and who didn't. Because he's afraid, she said quietly. People like him are terrified of the day when folks like us don't have to ask permission to exist in the same space as they do. So they try to keep us out however they can. Amara looked out the window at the darkening sea. I hate feeling like this. I know, sweetheart. I know. A waiter appeared at their table, a young black man in his 20s with kind eyes and a genuine smile. Good evening, ladies. My name is Isaiah, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. His voice was warm, and when he set down their menus, he gave Amara a small, knowing nod, as if to say, I see you. I'm glad you're here. It was such a small gesture, but it made Amara's chest loosen just a little. Can I start you both with something to drink? Isaiah asked. Miss Claudette ordered iced tea. Amara asked for lemonade, her voice barely above a whisper. As Isaiah walked away, she noticed him glance toward the entrance, where Agent Sims was now speaking quietly but intensely into her phone, pacing just outside the dining room doors. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than just this moment. 15 minutes later, the ship's intercom crackled to life. The voice that came through was calm but unmistakably serious. Attention all passengers and crew. This is Captain Gregory Ashford. Due to an ongoing federal investigation, the Sea of Roses will be holding position until further notice. All passengers are asked to remain in their current locations. We will provide updates as they become available. Thank you for your cooperation. The dining room erupted in confused murmurs. Passengers looked at each other, some pulling out their phones, others trying to flag down waiters for answers. A woman at a nearby table leaned toward her husband and whispered loudly enough for Amara to hear, "What investigation? What's going on?" Amara's heart pounded. She looked at her grandmother, whose expression had gone very still. "They stopped the whole ship," Amara whispered. "Yes, baby." They did. Agent Sims reappeared in the doorway, flanked now by two other figures, a tall white man in a dark suit with a federal marshal's badge clipped to his belt, and a shorter Latina woman carrying a briefcase. The three of them moved through the dining room with purpose, heading directly toward the staff entrance that led to the kitchen. As they passed Amara's table, Agent Sims paused briefly and met her eyes. "You just keep eating," she said quietly. "We'll take care of the rest." Then she was gone, disappearing through the swinging doors into the kitchen. In the kitchen, chaos had already begun to spread. Line cooks stood frozen at their stations, staring as the three federal agents entered. Sous chefs exchanged nervous glances, and at the center of it all stood Chef Dominic Hartwell, his arms crossed over his chest, his face flushed with indignation. "This is my kitchen," he said sharply. "You have no authority here." Agent Sims stopped directly in front of him. "Actually, Chef Hartwell, I have every authority. This ship operates under U.S. maritime law, which means every action taken on board is subject to federal jurisdiction. And right now you're being investigated for a violation of Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Hartwell's face twisted. That girl didn't have the right documentation. I was doing my job. She had a valid reservation issued by a federally recognized program, the Latina agent said, opening her briefcase and pulling out a printed copy. This reservation was confirmed 3 weeks ago and includes full VIP dining access. You denied her entry without cause. I didn't deny her because she's black, Hartwell snapped. I denied her because she didn't meet the dress code. She was wearing a sundress, Agent Sims said flatly. The same kind of dress at least 4 other young girls in that dining room are wearing right now. Try again, Hartwell's jaw worked. I don't have to explain myself to you. The male marshal stepped forward. Actually, you do. And you're going to. We've already spoken to Marcus Delgado, who confirmed you made the decision unilaterally. We've also reviewed security footage from the entrance, which clearly shows you allowed multiple guests through without question while stopping only the black passengers. That's not... We're not done, Agent Sims interrupted. We've also initiated a full review of guest complaints filed on this ship over the past 18 months. Do you know how many involve your conduct, Chef Hartwell? He said nothing, but his face had gone pale. 14, she continued. 14 separate complaints. 12 of them from passengers of color, all of them describing similar incidents, being turned away, spoken to disrespectfully, treated as though they didn't belong. And every single one of those complaints was quietly dismissed by ship management. The kitchen had gone completely silent. Every staff member was watching now, their faces a mixture of shock and discomfort. The Latina agent pulled out another document. We've also obtained records showing that you've been reprimanded twice by corporate HR for inappropriate comments made to crew members of color. Both times, the complaints were resolved with mandatory sensitivity training that you apparently never completed. Hartwell's fists clenched at his sides. This is a witch hunt. No, Agent Sims said coldly. This is accountability. Something you've avoided for far too long. She turned to the marshal. Escort Chef Hartwell to the security office. I want a full recorded statement. You can't do this, Hartwell said, his voice rising. I have rights. So does that 13-year-old girl you humiliated in front of a crowd, Agent Sims shot back. And unlike you, she actually didn't do anything wrong. The marshal took Hartwell by the arm and led him toward the exit. As they passed the line, cooks, one of them, a young black woman with her hair tied back in a scarf, met Hartwell's eyes and shook her head slowly. The disappointment in her expression was devastating. Back in the dining room, Amara and Miss Claudette had just been served their entrees when Captain Ashford himself appeared at their table. He was a tall man in his 60s with silver hair and a crisp white uniform adorned with gold stripes and insignia. His face was grave, but his eyes were sincere. "Mrs. Hughes, Amara," he said, his voice low and respectful. "I owe you both an apology. What happened tonight was unacceptable, and it never should have occurred on my ship." Miss Claudette looked up at him, her gaze steady. "Apologies are easy, Captain. What are you going to do about it?" The captain nodded slowly. "Chef Hartwell has been removed from duty pending a full investigation. We're cooperating completely with the FBI, and I've ordered a comprehensive review of all our service protocols and staff training. I can promise you that changes will be made." "Will he be fired?" Amara asked quietly. Captain Ashford hesitated, then met her eyes. "That will depend on the outcome of the investigation. But I can tell you this. If the findings support what I've already seen, he will never work on one of our ships again." Amara nodded, though the knot in her chest didn't fully loosen. She wanted to believe him. But she had also learned tonight that promises didn't always mean protection. As the captain walked away, Isaiah returned with dessert, a beautiful slice of chocolate cake with fresh berries and whipped cream. He set it down in front of Amara with a warm smile. "On the house," he said softly. "You deserve something sweet after tonight." Amara managed a small smile. "Thank you." As she took her first bite, she looked out at the ocean again. The sun had fully set now, and the sky was a deep, endless blue scattered with stars. Somewhere on this ship, powerful people were being forced to answer for their actions. And for the first time all night, Amara felt something other than fear. She felt the beginning of justice. Before we continue, drop a comment and let us know what city you're watching from. The next morning, Amara woke to sunlight streaming through the balcony curtains. For a moment, she forgot where she was, forgot everything that had happened the night before. Then it all came rushing back. The doorway, the chef's hand raised like a wall, the word "actual guests" cutting through her like glass. She sat up slowly, her stomach still tight with the residue of humiliation. Miss Claudette was already awake, sitting in the armchair by the window with a cup of coffee in her hands, staring out at the endless blue horizon. "Morning." "Baby," her grandmother said softly without turning around. "Morning, Grandma." Amara's voice was hoarse. Miss Claudette turned to face her, and Amara could see the weariness in her eyes, the kind that came not from lack of sleep, but from carrying too much weight for too long. "How are you feeling?" Amara shrugged, pulling her knees up to her chest. "I don't know. I keep thinking about it, about the way he looked at me. Like I was invisible, or worse." Miss Claudette set down her coffee and crossed the room to sit on the edge of the bed. She took Amara's hand in both of hers, her skin warm and rough from decades of work. "Listen to me, sweetheart. What that man did to you was wrong. It was cruel, and it was rooted in something ugly that has nothing to do with who you are. But you need to remember something important. You didn't shrink. You didn't run. You stood there with your head up, and when someone with power stepped in, the truth came out. That takes courage." "I didn't feel courageous," Amara whispered. "I felt scared. Courage isn't the absence of fear, baby. It's doing what's right even when you're terrified." Miss Claudette squeezed her hand. "And last night you did exactly that." There was a knock at the door. Miss Claudette rose to answer it, and Amara heard a familiar voice. Agent Sims. "Good morning, Mrs. Hughes. I hope I'm not intruding. I wanted to check in and give you an update." Miss Claudette stepped aside, and Agent Sims entered, still dressed impeccably despite the early hour. She nodded respectfully to Amara, who was now sitting cross-legged on the bed in her pajamas. "How are you holding up, Amara?" Agent Sims asked, her voice gentler than it had been the night before. "I'm okay," Amara said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Agent Sims pulled a chair closer and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "I wanted to let you both know what's happened since last night. Chef Hartwell has been officially suspended pending the outcome of our investigation. We've taken formal statements from him, from multiple witnesses and from several crew members who came forward after hearing about the incident." "Crew members?" Miss Claudette asked, settling back into the armchair. "Yes. It turns out Chef Hartwell has been a problem for a long time." We've documented at least 9 separate complaints from staff members, mostly people of color, describing a hostile work environment. He's made derogatory comments, assigned unfair duties, and created a culture of fear in that kitchen. People were too afraid to speak up because they thought management would protect him. Amara felt a chill run through her. So it wasn't just me, no, sweetheart. It wasn't just you. Agent Sims leaned forward slightly. What happened to you was the moment everything finally broke open. Because you had the courage to stand there, and because there were witnesses who recorded it, we now have the evidence we need to hold him, and the cruise line, accountable. What happens to him now? Amara asked. That depends on several factors, Agent Sims said carefully. The FBI is conducting a full civil rights investigation. If we determine that his actions constitute a pattern of discriminatory conduct, he could face federal charges. At the very least, he'll never work for this cruise line again. The company is also facing potential lawsuits from former employees and passengers. Miss Claudette's expression was unreadable. And what about the company itself? Are they going to change, or are they just going to find someone else to do the same thing more quietly? Agent Sims smiled faintly, a knowing look in her eyes. That's the question, isn't it? Which is why we're not just investigating Hartwell. We're investigating the entire organizational structure, how complaints are handled, how staff are trained, how policies are enforced. If they want to continue operating under U.S. jurisdiction, they're going to have to prove they're serious about reform. There was another knock at the door, softer this time. Miss Claudette opened it to reveal Captain Ashford, his white uniform spotless, his expression somber. Behind him stood Marcus Delgado, the assistant guest services manager from the night before, looking deeply uncomfortable. Mrs. Hughes, Amara, the captain said, removing his hat. May I come in? Miss Claudette stepped aside and the captain entered, followed by Marcus. Agent Sims remained seated, watching closely. Captain Ashford cleared his throat. I wanted to speak with you both personally. First, to offer my deepest apologies. What happened to you last night was inexcusable. And it happened under my watch. That responsibility falls on me. Amara looked up at him, trying to read his face. He seemed sincere, but she had learned that sincerity didn't always mean action. Second, the captain continued, I want to inform you that we've initiated a top-to-bottom review of our guest services and staff conduct policies. We're bringing in external consultants to audit our practices and ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. That's a start, Miss Claudette said evenly. But words are easy, Captain. What guarantees do we have that this isn't just damage control? The captain nodded. You're right to be skeptical, which is why I'm also announcing that the Sea of Roses will be implementing a new passenger advocacy program. Any guest who feels they've been treated unfairly will have direct access to a third-party ombudsman who can investigate and take immediate action. No more complaints being buried or dismissed? Marcus stepped forward, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. Amara, Mrs. Hughes, I also want to apologize. I should have intervened sooner. I should have questioned Chef Hartwell's decision instead of assuming he was right. I failed you, and I'm sorry. Amara studied him for a moment. He looked genuinely remorseful, his eyes red-rimmed as though he hadn't slept. Why didn't you stop him? She asked quietly. Marcus swallowed hard. Because I was afraid. Hartwell had a reputation. If you crossed him, he'd make your life miserable. I saw it happen to other people, and I didn't want it to happen to me. But that's no excuse. I should have been braver. Amara nodded slowly. She understood fear. She had felt it herself just last night. But she also understood that fear couldn't be an excuse for letting injustice happen. What are you going to do differently now? She asked. Marcus looked her in the eye. I'm going to speak up. Every time, even if it costs me my job, because nothing is worth staying silent when someone is being hurt. Captain Ashford turned to Agent Sims. We're committed to full cooperation with your investigation. Whatever you need, personnel records, security footage, complaint files, you'll have complete access. Agent Sims stood, adjusting her suit jacket. Good, because if I find out you're hiding anything, the consequences will be severe. This isn't just about one chef. This is about an entire system that allowed him to operate unchecked for years. The captain nodded gravely. Understood. After they left, The room fell into a heavy silence. Amara looked at her grandmother, then at Agent Sims, who was gathering her things. "What happens to me now?" Amara asked. "Everyone on this ship knows who I am. They're probably all talking about me." Agent Sims paused and turned back to her. "Yes, they probably are. But here's what you need to understand, Amara. Some of them are talking because they're uncomfortable with the truth you forced them to see. But others, many others, are talking because you gave them hope. You showed them that standing up for yourself matters, that it can actually change things." "I didn't mean to," Amara said quietly. "The best revolutions never do." Agent Sims smiled. "You just wanted to eat dinner. But by refusing to be invisible, you became impossible to ignore." Later that afternoon, Amara and Miss Claudette ventured out onto the main deck. Amara had been nervous about facing other passengers, worried about the stares and whispers. But as they walked through the pool area, something unexpected happened. A middle-aged black woman approached them, her eyes warm. "Excuse me, are you Amara?" Amara nodded hesitantly. The woman's face broke into a wide smile. "I just wanted to say thank you. My daughter is about your age, and last night I showed her the video of you standing at that door. I told her, that's what courage looks like. You made a difference, sweetheart." Before Amara could respond, a white couple approached from the other side. The man extended his hand to Miss Claudette. "We were in the dining room last night. We saw everything. We've already filed a formal complaint with the cruise line supporting your account. What happened was disgraceful, and we wanted you to know that not everyone stayed silent. Throughout the afternoon, more people approached, some to apologize, some to offer support, some just to acknowledge what had happened. A teenage girl with curly brown hair stopped Amara near the smoothie bar and said simply, 'You're brave.' I don't know if I could have done that." Amara felt something shift inside her. The shame and humiliation that had weighed on her since last night began to lift, replaced by something she hadn't expected: pride. Not pride in being singled out or humiliated, but pride in how she had responded. She hadn't yelled or lashed out. She had simply stood her ground and let the truth speak for itself. That evening, as the sun set over the Caribbean, Amara and Miss Claudette returned to the crystal dining room. This time, there was no one blocking the door. The maitre d', a kind older man named Vincent, greeted them warmly and personally escorted them to a table by the window. Isaiah was their server again, and this time his smile was even brighter. "Welcome back, ladies. It's an honor to serve you tonight." As they ate, Amara looked around the dining room. It looked the same as it had the night before: the chandeliers, the white tablecloths, the soft music. But it felt different, because now she knew she belonged here. Not because someone gave her permission, but because she had claimed her right to be treated with dignity. Miss Claudette raised her glass of iced tea. "To courage, baby, and to never letting anyone make you feel small." Amara clinked her glass of lemonade against her grandmother's. "To courage." 3 days later, as the Sea of Roses prepared to dock in Miami, Amara stood on the balcony of their stateroom one last time. The city skyline glittered in the distance, and she could already see the port getting closer. Agent Sims had left the ship the day before, but not before giving Amara her business card. "If you ever need anything," she had said, "or if you ever want to talk about what happened, you call me. You're a remarkable young woman, Amara. Don't ever forget that." Now, as the ship glided into port, Amara thought about everything that had happened. She thought about the fear, the humiliation, the anger, but she also thought about the people who had stood up for her, the passengers who had recorded the incident, Isaiah, who had treated her with kindness, Agent Sims, who had refused to let injustice go unchallenged, and she thought about herself, about the girl who had stood in that doorway, trembling but unbroken. Miss Claudette came out onto the balcony and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Ready to go home, baby?" Amara nodded. "Yeah, but Grandma?" "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad we came, even with everything that happened. I'm glad we didn't back down." Miss Claudette kissed the top of her head. "So am I, baby. So am I." As they disembarked an hour later, Amara noticed a small crowd of reporters waiting near the terminal. Agent Sims had warned them this might happen, that the story had gone viral and people wanted to hear from her. Miss Claudette squeezed her hand.
You don't have to talk to them if you don't want to.
Amara took a deep breath. She thought about all the people who had shared their own stories with her over the past few days. People who had been turned away, silenced, made to feel like they didn't matter. "I want to," she said. They walked toward the reporters together, hand in hand. And when the first microphone was extended toward her, Amara spoke clearly and calmly. "I'm just a girl who wanted to have dinner with her grandmother. But what happened to me happens to a lot of people every day. And it's not okay. We deserve to be treated with respect. We deserve to be seen. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to stand up for themselves, then it was worth it." The cameras flashed. The questions came fast. But Amara stood tall, her grandmother beside her, and spoke her truth. Because she had learned something powerful on the Sea of Roses, that her voice mattered, that her presence mattered, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to be erased. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Justice isn't just about laws, it's about all of us choosing to do what's right. What city are you watching from? Drop a comment below.